With his smash abilities and his KO power, this Swedish, Russian, whatever he is, beautiful husk of a man will become the pound for pound GOAT. Oh yeah, I also added this in there. GSP would come out of retirement and he would defeat GSP for the welterweight title. Hello and welcome back, you utter savages. Today I'm going to be making a new video and it's going to be about how Khamzat Chimaev can become the UFC GOAT. So right off the bat, you might be asking yourself, hey John, so I think you're jumping the gun a little bit. He only just beat his first ranked fighter. He's only 4-0 in the UFC. How do you have any right to claim that this man can possibly be the GOAT? Well, I'll stop you right there and I'll say, well, I made this PowerPoint presentation to just specifically show you every possible route that Khamzat can take where we would actually sit down and at the end of the day call him the GOAT. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is how Khamzat becomes the UFC GOAT. Route number 1. The double champ GOAT. You might be asking, what does this mean? Well, let me get you started. So, first off, he has to defeat Neil Magny. So, I feel like for this route, he has to face a couple of contenders before we can call him the GOAT. So, let's just throw Neil Magny at him. He's kind of trash. If Michael Chiesa can make Neil Magny look like he just stepped on the mats for the first time, and then Neil Magny squeaks a decision past Jeff Neal, and his only recent notable loss is Robbie Lawler, who's washed. This should be easy pickings for Mr. Khamzat. So, who does he fight after that? He fights the next contender, Vicente Luque. So, Vicente Luque should be the #1 contender in my opinion. So, if he beats Neil Magny, Khamzat can then fight the #1 contender, Vicente Luque. So, who does he fight after Vicente Luque? Well, if he fights the #1 contender and beats him, he fights the champion, Kamaru Usman, for the welterweight title. Of course, he smacks him, he ragdolls him, he smashes. And then after that, Kamaru Usman was the welterweight GOAT. He basically cleaned the whole division. What could possibly be next for Mr. Khamzat Boris Chimaev? Well, move up and fight Adesanya for the middleweight title. He said he did want to move between both divisions, defend both titles. And I feel like this is actually just simply enough to call him the UFC GOAT. He basically dethroned two people that we have in the GOAT discussion. Adesanya, debatably better than Silva. Usman, debatably better than GSP. So if Khamzat beats both of them handily, what is there else to say? I mean, he's the GOAT. This is route number 2. This is where Khamzat becomes the pound for pound GOAT. You might be asking, what does that mean? Well, let's get right into it. Route number 1, he has to defeat Gilbert Burns. So, when I make these lists, I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. Realistic. So, realistically, Khamzat could fight Magny next. Realistically, Khamzat could fight Gilbert Burns next. And what would happen next if he fought Gilbert Burns and beat him? He would have to defeat Kamaru Usman for the welterweight title. This would bolt him right up the rankings, gets the title shot, sells massive pay-per-views, beats Kamaru Usman. What's next? Well, of course, he defeats Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title. I mean, what else did you expect to happen? He's not going to defend the welterweight title without trying to be a double champ. Dana White loves this guy. He has Dana White privilege. He will fight who he wants to fight. And I think he would want to be the double champ. And then what would happen after that? And this is where the curveball comes in. So I think Usman would deserve a rematch after defending the title for that many times. And I think Khamzat Usman would be a banger of a fight. Therefore, this rematch makes sense. If he beats Usman twice, who's #1 pound for pound, and he beats Adesanya, he would be the pound for pound GOAT. There's literally no denying it. I mean, with his smash abilities and his KO power, this Swedish, Russian, whatever he is, beautiful husk of a man will become the pound for pound GOAT. Oh yeah, I also added this in there. GSP would come out of retirement and he would defeat GSP for the welterweight title. Yeah, that's probably what would happen next, right? GSP said he never wanted to really come out of retirement unless he, felt a right opponent. Habib wasn't enough for GSP. Usman's not enough. Maybe Khamzat. And then he loses because he's 80 years old. And then Khamzat is truly the pound for pound GOAT after this one. So route number 3 is where Khamzat becomes the pay-per-view GOAT. So up to this route, it seemed realistic what Khamzat could do, right? But this one might take a little bit of a curveball, so you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, step number 1, Khamzat defeats Nate Diaz. So this fight has actually been talked about, and I think Khamzat would utterly decimate him and destroy him, and would make Nate Diaz look like a complete and utter fool, which would be upsetting. But it would be even better for my Khamzat agenda, because who would he fight after Nate Diaz, you might ask? Well, the guy that Nate Diaz beat, who's the most notable name in the UFC, Conor McGregor. Imagine Conor McGregor versus Khamzat, #1 contendership for the welterweight title. Just take my money, Dana. Just take it. Just take it. Khamzat would smash him. Well, at least in this reality, Khamzat would smash him. And then he fights Kamaru, beats him, smacks the brakes off him for the welterweight title, and then he defeats GSP for the welterweight title, thus cementing his status as the welterweight GOAT. Now, see, I have no transition here because this route ties directly into the previous route. So this is the route where Khamzat just makes the most money. So it might seem a little confusing. So step number 1, he defeats Nate Diaz again. Now, you might be asking, well, wouldn't he fight Conor next? Isn't that what you just said? Well, yes, he actually does fight Conor next. But this time he loses to Conor. What? He makes more money if he loses? Oh, hear me out. Who does he... So, if he fought Nate Diaz and beat him, then he fights Conor and loses, who would his next fight be? What would even make sense at that point? Literally, there's nobody... Oh, yes. Dustin Poirier, the guy who just beat Conor twice. Now, this is just stirring the pot. Do you smell what I'm cooking yet? Do you guys smell what the next step is? Comment below right now. Pause the video. Okay, next step. Khamzat defeats Conor for the welterweight title. So, by my prediction, Conor would have beaten Khamzat, then beat Usman, and then Khamzat beats Poirier, and then he's like, oh, I beat this guy that you couldn't even beat, yada, yada, yada. Defeats Conor for the welterweight title, and then what's step number 5? The trilogy, because Conor McGregor, if he loses, he has to rematch, and then if he beats him, then he has to have the trilogy, but if he wins first, and then he has a rightful rematch, and then trilogy happens. Trilogies always happen in Conor McGregor land. I mean, come on now. So, if Khamzat beats him, Conor's going to be like, give me my trilogy. Now, step number 6, which I didn't include, would be the quadrilogy, but, you know, Khamzat would probably utterly destroy him at this point. So, that's the next round. Route number 5. Now, this is where Khamzat becomes the true GOAT, regardless of what anybody can possibly say. You will see what I'm talking about. Step number 1, Khamzat defeats Colby Covington. So, you might notice in each route, I used a different opponent as the step 1. We have Neil Magny, that's a likely opponent. We have Gilbert Burns, pretty likely. Nate Diaz, that was talked about. And now Colby Covington, which has been talked about recently too. Now, the only person I didn't really include was Bilal Muhammad, because screw Bilal Muhammad, I don't like him. So he's not going to be on the list. So let's say Khamzat defeats Colby Covington. Who does he fight next? Well, of course, he fights Usman and beats him for the welterweight title. Duh. Then he moves up, beats Adesanya for the middleweight title. We've been over this. He's now the double champ. Debatably the GOAT. He's in the conversation at this point. Now he defends the middleweight title against GSP, because GSP might want to be like, oh, I want to be a 2-time middleweight champ. Well, here's your opportunity, GSP, and you lose. Khamzat is the double champ, defeats GSP. Now he defeats Anderson Silva for the middleweight title. So now at this point, Khamzat is just building, he's just stacking his resume for the middleweight division. I mean, he's just stacking it. He beat Usman, he beat Silva, he beat Adesanya, he beat GSP. Like at this point, he seems like an unstoppable force. This is only 5 fights from now. Keep this in mind. This can realistically happen like by next year. So Anderson Silva could, in theory, come back to the UFC. He did have more fights in his contract, even though they let him go because they didn't want to see him get hurt. But this would make so much money, and it would be such a big headliner that the UFC could just not say no. Because the way Khamzat fights, he could spare Silva some brain damage. You know, he can just wrestle him. Dana White would just take him to the corner and be like, yo, this is a free win. You're minus 8,000 against this man. Just wrestle him. Please don't hurt him. And then Khamzat would smash. This is how I see the fight playing out. So who would he fight after Anderson Silva? Wait, there's more steps? Yes, of course there's more steps. Step number 6, Khamzat moves up to heavyweight, skips light heavyweight, screw that division. It's too much of a log jam. Dana White's going to be like, all right, whatever. Jon Jones, I see at this point being the heavyweight champ. Khamzat will call him out because he's a fat boy. Because Jon Jones is a fat man, and those leg kicks that he posts are very slow. So he could fight Nagano, he could fight Gon, he could fight Stipe, but let's just say for predictions and GOAT argument's sake, he fights Jon Jones, he would of course beat him. Duh. Like, there's obviously he would destroy him. And then what could possibly cement Khamzat's status as the true GOAT? So he beat Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, Adesanya, Usman, Colby, GSP. Who's missing? Well, of course, who else has Khamzat called out? It is Brock Lesnar. So Khamzat defends the heavyweight title against Brock Lesnar. Let's just say Brock Lesnar puts the WWE title on the line. He's going to be the quadruple champ if you include that one. And if this route happens, there's no doubting that Khamzat Chimaev would be the utter UFC GOAT. Okay, thanks for watching, you utter savages. Thanks for getting to this point in the video. Make sure you leave a like, make sure you leave a comment, make sure you subscribe. I'm churning these out like butter right now. These are so fun to make. I'm just spewing nonsense, but they are takes that I stand by, though. I will defend any of these takes. Now, all of these scenarios could most definitely happen. It's whether or not Dana White allows it, or it's gonna happen in a different universe. Like, these are definitely multiverse options. Like, the UFC multiverse is definitely on the table here. So just keep that in mind when you're watching these UFC GOAT videos. These definitely are happening somewhere else. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm just commenting on what is happening already, you know, in a parallel. All right, thanks for watching, you savages, and peace.